glorious day in history. Death is beating, you have rescued me. Sing it out, 'cause Jesus is alive. Empty cross, the empty grave. Life eternal, you have won the day. Celebrate, 'cause Jesus is alive. He's alive. Here we go. And oh, happy day, you wash my sin away. Oh, happy day, I'll never be the same. And forever I am changed. When I stand in that place, free at last, meeting face to face, I am yours, Jesus, you are mine. In this joy and perfect peace, perfect pain, finally we'll see. Celebrate, 'cause Jesus is alive. He's alive. And oh, happy day, you wash my sin away. Oh, happy day, I'll never be the same. And forever I am changed. All right, we're gonna break it down right here. And oh, what a glorious day, what a glorious way that you have saved me. And oh, what a glorious day, what a glorious name. All right, gotta sing this part out loud right here. And 1, 2, 3, sing it. Oh, happy day, you wash my sin away. Oh, happy day,
What are you doing?
happy day, I'll never be the same. Oh, happy day, you wash my sin away. Oh, happy day, I'll never be the same. And forever I am changed. All right, everybody, give yourselves a hand. That was pretty all right there. All right, that was pretty strong. Pretty strong, except for this section right here for like the first half, but you eventually figured it out. So I'll take it. Good enough. All right, before we move on to the next song, I want to go ahead and say a quick prayer. That was just a good song that kind of gets you guys into it. But the next couple songs are going to be a little slower, a little less energetic. But remember, just as we're singing these songs, just remember who we're singing to. That ultimately the purpose for all this worship, all the songs that we sing, is really just to give glory to God, and we want to honor Him. So I just want to say a quick prayer before we go on. God, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here for this weekend. Thank you for just the chance to come and to worship you, to grow closer to you. Because God, ultimately, that's the purpose of our life, is just to grow closer to you, just to know you, and to be able to worship you. So thank you for the opportunity to do that. And I pray, God, that as we sing these songs, as we worship and as we praise you, that our focus is always on you, that it's never on those who are around us, it's never on ourselves. But God, that all we're really worried about is what you think of us. And God, we know that you love us. And so we pray these things in your name. Amen. The splendor of the King, clothed in majesty, let all the earth rejoice, let all the earth rejoice. He wraps himself in light, and darkness tries to hide, and trembles at his voice, and trembles at his voice. And how great is our God. Oh, sing with me, how great is our God. And all will see how great is our God. Age to age, and age to age he stands, and time is in his hands, beginning and the end, beginning and the end. The Godhead three in one, Father, Spirit, Son, the Lion and the Lamb, the Lion and the Lamb. And how great is our God. Oh, sing with me, how great is our God. And all will see how great is our God. He's the name above all names, 'cause you're the name above all names. You are worthy of all praise, and my heart will sing how great is our God. Let's sing that again. He's the name above all names, 'cause you're the name above all names. You are worthy of all praise, and my heart will sing how great is our God. Let's sing that chorus. And how great is our God. Oh, sing with me, how great is our God. And all will see how great is our God. Amen. Aren't you glad that we serve a God who's so powerful? Can we just give him praise?
My sorrows and dead in my sin, lost without hope, no place to begin. You made a way to let mercy come in. When death was arrested and my life was redeemed, only beauty remains. My orphan heart is given a name. Morning grew quiet, my feet rose to dance. When death was arrested and my life began. Sing, oh, your grace. Oh, your grace, so free. washes over me. You have made me new. Now life begins with you. Loose from my chains, I'm a prisoner no more. Shame was a ransom you faithfully bore. Cancel my debt and you call me his friend. When death was arrested and my life began. Oh, your grace so free washes over me. You have made me new. Now life begins with you. It's your endless love pouring down on us. You have made us new. Now life begins with you. Savior displayed on a criminal's cross. Darkness rejoices as though heaven had lost. But then Jesus rose with all freedom in hand. That's when death was arrested and my life began. Oh, your grace so free washes over me. You have made me new. Now life begins with you. It's your endless love pouring down on us. You have made us new. Now life begins with you. We're free, say we're free. Oh, we're free, free, forever we're free. Come enjoy the song of all the redeemed. Now we're free, free, ever, amen. When death was arrested in my life, we're free, free, ever we're free. Come enjoy the song of all the redeemed. Yes, we're free, free, ever, amen. When death was arrested and my life began. When death was arrested and my life began. When death was arrested and my life began.
Amen, guys. We're going to do something a little bit different right now. For the next couple minutes, I want to just go ahead and take some time to pray over tonight's service and tomorrow's service. So what I want you to do is get guys with guys, girls with girls, groups of 2 or 3. Just take a couple minutes. This might be a little uncomfortable for some of you. That's okay. Just remember you're talking to God. You're not talking to anybody else in the room. Just take a couple minutes. I want everybody to get in group. If you want to pull some chairs together, you can do that. But just take a couple minutes. Take some time to pray over the weekend. All right, guys. And if the leaders want to come and mix in too, that would be awesome. God, I thank you so much for the opportunity that we have to be here this weekend. I pray for Brother Leland as he shares tonight. I pray for Andy as he shares for the next couple of nights. But God, mostly I pray for each and every person in this room, whether it's a leader, whether it's a member of the youth here at First Baptist. God, I pray for each and every one of them. God, that this weekend their lives would be changed. God, I don't know who in here is a professing believer of you and who is not. God, statistics show us that probably there are some in here who are not believers, who don't know what would happen if they died tomorrow. And so, God, I just pray that this weekend that they would find that good news and that saving grace that comes from you, that assurance that to know that we can spend eternity with you because you love us so much. And God, thank you so much for how you love us. And God, I just pray that each and every one of us would just love you to the best of our heart's ability. I pray this in your name. Amen. All right, if y'all can find your seats, we're gonna sing one more song before Brother Leland comes and shares his message. Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. We live for you. You're holy. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Sing that first verse, worthy. Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. You're worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. So we live for you. Oh, we live for you. Holy and holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. I will build. And I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. And I will build my life
is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up mine eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around. I'll build, and I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be. Just your voices. And I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. God, we thank you that we can put our trust in you, that we can love you, because you're so firm, you're so strong, you'll never fail us. And I pray that we always run to you in any time of trouble and any time of need, that we know that we can call on you, because you are perfect, and you'll always be there for us. I pray this in your name, amen.
Have a seat. Have a seat. Now, if you don't know who I am Pastor Leland. I'm the pastor here, and I am really thankful that Chad, where is Chad? Over there, right back there. I'm thankful that he asked the old guy to come today and start this thing off and share with you a little bit. You know, he's been sharing with our staff this week in staff retreat. He talked a little bit about what goes on up here on Wednesday nights, some of the things y'all have been doing at the nursing home and all the other things. I've been hearing Chad and I meet every Thursday afternoon, and he just shares with me things that are happening up here. And I got to tell you, it's exciting. It fires me up. And I think it's what God is doing in your place right here, in your group, could literally start a revival in our whole church. And that's an exciting thing. We're going to baptize 2 more young people this Sunday morning. It's going to be an exciting time, and I hope that you'll be prepared to cheer for them when they come up out of that water, because it's, God has changed their life. Now, I'm not a cool guy. I'm really kind of a nerd. And the only cool thing about me is that I still play on my Xbox, all right? And you ought to see the guy when I go into, where you go and get the games, GameStop. When I go into there, you ought to see that guy's face. He said, "So are you looking for something for your grandson?" And I said, "Not really." He says, "For your son?" I said, "Not really. I'm looking for something for me." And of course, his mouth kind of drops open. He goes, "I don't know if we have games for your age folks, So, but he, I always like to go in there and kind of blow their mind a little bit when I go looking for one of my Xbox games, and because I still enjoy doing that. It's kind of something that kind of takes my mind off of other things every once in a while. I want to ask you this question tonight: how long have you lived? How long have you lived? 12 years, 15 years. Okay. No, you didn't really hear my question. That's not what I asked you. See, what you told me was how long your heart has been pumping blood through your body. You told me your age, but that's not what I asked you. I asked you, how long have you lived? Now, let me tell you why there's a difference in that. A few years ago, I jumped out of an airplane. 2 miles up in the air. I had a parachute, so it wasn't, I just didn't jump out of an airplane. But 2 miles up in the air, there's no safety net under you. There's no bungee cord attached to you. It is the most free feeling in the world, and you can't imagine when you're 2 miles up in the air and you're just in the middle of the air falling at 132 miles an hour, because that's about how fast you're falling according to the laws of gravity and all that kind of stuff. You're falling at about 132 miles an hour. It's an incredible, for those few moments, you are alive like you are not alive any other time. You know how sometimes you go, your parents will take you on a vacation, you see the mountains and you're like, yeah, that's great, and you're back on your phone again texting, and you're really not noticing what's around you. But then every once in a while, you go to the top of one of those mountains, you look around, and it's like, wow, you just breathe it in. You see, that's what I'm talking about. It's those little moments. So I was in the air skydiving for only a few minutes, maybe 3 or 4 minutes tops, but those 3 or 4 minutes were incredible. And if you add those kind of experiences up, then the question becomes, how long have you really lived? 30 minutes. Yeah, that's a better answer right there. That's probably true for all of us. If we really added up those kind of experiences where we just kind of all of a sudden got it and we stopped our routine and we breathed it in. We saw God's creation and we were amazed by it, you know. It was kind of a spiritual experience. Whatever it is, those kinds of things, that's how long you've really lived. Now, this weekend, you guys are talking about being risk takers. My wife would tell you that I am a risk taker. She has told me that often. As a matter of fact, many times when we're on vacation, she's calling my 3 daughters and saying, you know, your father has got me at this place or that place, and if we die, here's where we are. You know, she's always kind of going through that because we're always in some place that she thinks we're going to die. She thinks I'm going to kill her someday because we're on these vacations, and I like to take the risk, whether it's hiking up a mountain where there's bears around, or whether it's going outside to see the tornado in Kansas when it hits the hotel, or whatever it might be. You know, she knows that I like to kind of take those kinds of risks. And I have lived my life like that, not really because I set out to be that, but because God called me to that task. You know, I've been on many mission trips. I love missions. I've been doing missions most of my life, and I have been to Mexico when I've been arrested, and I've been to Mexico when I've had guns cocked and pointed in my direction, thought this might be your last moment of life in this world. I've been to China, where I wasn't supposed to be, and could have been arrested had they caught me there. And I've been to Egypt, where I had to be interviewed by the secret police there, and then had a bodyguard everywhere I went so I wouldn't get kidnapped by the Islamic extremists and all of these kinds of things. I've seen all of those kinds of things. I've been those kinds of places. And you know, it's been an exciting life for me because I've seen what God is doing all over the world. We've got folks who have been missionaries in this room right now, and they understand what I'm talking about. They've been in other places where sometimes your life might be in danger. But I know that was not the thing that really they thought about when they were there, because it wasn't the thing that I really thought about when I was there either. You see, taking a risk, living a risky life is something that God's going to call you to. And some of you say, well, so if I become a Christian, is God going to put me in some risky situations? I'm going to tell you, absolutely, He is. He is. And that, I don't want you to be afraid of that, because I want you to understand why God does that and what's really going on. You know, I read one time this was kind of what they said about a man. It said there was a very cautious man who never laughed or played. He never risked. He never tried. He never sang or prayed. And when one day he passed away, his insurance was denied. For since he never really lived, they claimed he never died. That's what I'm talking about. How long have you really lived? Now, most of you probably won't remember the name Carl Walenda, but he was the father of a family that did the trapeze, and they walked on the tightrope, the flying Walendas. And they had a special trick that they would do. It was a pyramid where they would get 2 guys on the wire. Now, this is a wire, no safety net. And then they would get 3 on top of those 2 guys, and then they'd get 2, and then they get 1 on the very top. Now, they're all standing on a wire. And they would do this all over the world, and people were just amazed, the flying Walendas. It was a big deal. Until one day, one of them made a mistake. They fell. 2 of them died, and 2 of them were injured for the rest of their lives. They'd never be able to do that again. Not long after that, Carl Walenda had the rest of his family up on the high wire doing that very same trick again. And after it was over, the news guys came up to him, and they couldn't believe it. They were like, why would you do this? We don't understand why. We didn't think you would ever get on the high wire again. Why would you get your family back up there again? And he really was kind of surprised by their question. And this is what he said to them. He said, to be on the wire is life. All else is waiting. Life is either a daring adventure or is nothing at all. Well, God wants you to have a daring adventure. You see, some people think Christianity is that boring life, but it's anything but that. Because God's going to put you in some uncomfortable situations. God's going to put you in some situations that stretch you. God's going to put you in some situations that maybe even scare you a little bit. As a matter of fact, I think that's the way it ought to be. You know, C.S. Lewis one time said, if what you're doing for God doesn't scare you, then you're not walking by faith. It is so easy, especially in America, because we've got it so nice. Our churches are nice. We have nice places that we can worship in, and all that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's real easy for us to come up here, and we can get all excited about Jesus, and while we're up here, then we go back out there in that world, and somehow we forget about that. We're not as excited out there because it's a little more risky, isn't it, to be excited about Jesus in a world that doesn't love Jesus. But that's the world we live in. And so C.S. Lewis would say, hey, if what you're doing for God doesn't scare you, then you're not really walking by faith. You ought to be stepping out on a limb so far that if the limb breaks, only God can catch you. That's what it's all about. I'll never forget when my wife and I came to Shreveport. And some of you have probably heard me share this story a little bit in church, but many of you haven't. And we were asked to come. I had finished school. And I was down in South Texas, and I was working at a chemical plant, building a chemical plant. I was a pipe fitter's helper. I had a baby and another one on the way, and I was paying off my bills is what I was doing. And this church calls us from Shreveport, the Summer Grove Baptist Church. And they said, hey, would you be willing to come be our interim youth minister? Now, we don't have a pastor, so we don't know how long you'll be here, but we need somebody for the summer. You may be here longer. We just really don't know. And so we can't promise you anything. We're just won't know if you want to come and if you would do that. And so I get off the phone, talk to them, and I'm talking to my wife, Rose. I said, let me see. They want me to quit my job here and move us all up there. And they don't know how long this job's going to last, but they just feel like that God's led them to ask me to come and be their interim youth minister. What do you think about that? She looks at me and says, well, it doesn't sound like a great offer to me. And I said, it doesn't to me either, but God said, yeah, but I want you to go. And so I quit my job. Now, we didn't own a car. We were too poor. We had to rent a car to come up here. I'd never been to Shreveport. I didn't know anybody in Shreveport. I lived in South Texas, and so I didn't know anything about Shreveport. And so we drove in, and we came to this church, and so, you know, we became they voted on us on a Wednesday night, and on Thursday morning at 6 in the morning, we left out with a group of kids going to Six Flags over Texas. I'll never forget it. And Rose was pregnant with my middle daughter, Andrea, at the time. And so we're on that bus going, and we head out. And I remember before we got there that day, before we came that Wednesday night, we're driving, and Rose looks at me and says, what if they don't vote us in? And I said, well, I guess we'll turn around and go home, you know. So we came here not knowing if we would be here a few months or a few weeks or what. Right after that, they got a pastor, Wayne Dubose, and you know the rest of that story. Brother Wayne asked me after a while to stay, and so that church that I didn't know if I'd be at for just a few weeks, I ended up being at for 15 years. It's an incredible story. So, you know, I saw God. It was a risky thing, and as a matter of fact, some of the people in the church thought that this committee had promised me something. They said, nobody would do this. Nobody would quit their job and bring their family up here without a promise or a guarantee. But that's exactly what I did. Was it risky? Well, it looks like it was, but in hindsight, it wasn't risky at all, was it? Because God knew all along what he was going to do. And that's what I want you to realize tonight. There are two kinds of people in church. There are risk takers and there are caretakers. Now, if the risk takers in the church, if they are fueled by the caretakers, here's what they say. They will all go to the undertaker with little to show for their lives. In other words, there won't really be anything happen if everybody is just a caretaker and nobody's a risk taker. The kingdom of God needs risk takers. People who it's okay with them if God puts them out there on the wire. Listen, what I do every single week scares me to death. It scares me to death to get in front of you. I'm a little intimidated, to be honest, because I'm an old guy, you know, and you're not. And so it intimidates me a little bit to be up here in front of you and share these things. And so it scares me to death. Every Sunday morning when I get in front of that church, it scares me to death. I go through that thing every Saturday night of, tomorrow morning. It's kind of a panic mode, you know. It's coming, and you're just mulling over that message, and you're kind of working it up in your heart. And I spend every Saturday like that. My wife will tell you. She calls herself a Saturday night widow, because I'm in my study, and she's in her room, and she's watching her Hallmark movies or whatever, and I'm just, I may have a ball game on or something, but I'm really in the Word, and I'm into that message. I'm trying to make sure that I hadn't missed it somewhere, or missed something somewhere, that I had messed it up, that I've done exactly what God called me to do. And so I understand it. It is a risk. That for me, every single time I get up there, because it does scare me to death. Chad would tell you the same thing. He's taken a risk by becoming our youth pastor. Chad, who's never had any experience in that, but all of a sudden God called him in the ministry, and he jumped in there, and we're excited about him, and I know you are as well. You love him, and that's a good thing. So, listen, I want you to turn in your Bibles to Romans 8:28. And some of you are going to say, well, wait a minute, brother, what does this have to do with taking a risk? But this is the real key. If you get this, taking a risk isn't going to bother you. See, I don't really look at my life, and I was telling my wife this today, Rose, I said, I don't really see myself as a big risk taker. She said, well, you are. And I said, well, I get that, but I don't really see myself that way, because I get what I'm about to share with you. I understand this. It kind of speaks to me in Romans 8:28. Now, you know this verse really well. You've heard this verse many times, Romans 8:28. And here's what it is. And we know that God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God and to those who are called according to his purpose. God is causing things to work together good, not for everybody in the world, but for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. And I'm one of those people that love God and are called according to his purpose. And so I know that no matter what happens in my life, even the bad things, God is going to make them into good things. He's going to grow me through them. He's going to make good things come out of them. And because of that, I don't worry about the risks that I'm sometimes called upon to take. Why? Because what's the worst thing that can happen to me? I could lose my life. Well, big deal. What if I do? All I've lost is this old body that's getting old anyway and not doing what I want it to do. I haven't lost my life, because I'm going to have eternal life with him forever. So it's not a big deal to me, one way or the other. See, you've heard me say this so many times. You really can't live until you're not afraid to die. And there's a lot of folks who don't really know that they're saved. There's a lot of folks who don't really know Jesus personally. They know about him, and they know about religion, but I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about a relationship with a living God, Jesus, who loves you. In this verse, it says, hey, God is going to take care of things. He's going to turn things around in your life, even the bad things. Now, here's the question that came to my mind. Maybe you might think of this, and it's this. Can God take a risk? The answer is no. God can't take a risk. God can't take a risk at all. And you know why? Because here's what risk is. Risk is putting yourself in a position of maybe sustaining injury or loss, okay? But we don't know the outcome. That's why we call it a risk. But God always knows the outcome to everything. That's why God cannot take a risk, because he already knows the outcome of what's going to happen. You and I don't know the outcome, so what do we say? We say, Lord, I don't really know the outcome of this, but I'm trusting your plan for my life. I'm trusting your love and grace in my life. I'm trusting your purpose for me in my life, even in this situation that I don't understand. It's risky for me, but it's not risky for God. And God knows the outcome. And even if I were to lose my life in that, suppose I go to a mission trip and I do lose my life, even then I would have to say, to God be the glory. You see, when I began to look at risk like that, I'm saying, for me it's a risk, but for God it's not. He knows already what the outcome's going to be. He's already there in tomorrow. So he gets the outcome. You know, in a few weeks, I'll be leaving with some of the guys. That's why I'm growing this beard, to go to Alaska. We're going to go to the Iditarod. We'll be working the finish line up in Nome, Alaska. It is not a pretty part of Alaska. It's not a fun part of Alaska. It's, Robert, you could tell them, it's a pretty rough part of Alaska, isn't it? I mean, those people up there, the suicide rate's about 400 times the national average. The incest rate is almost 100%. I'm telling you, the abuse is incredible. It is dark spiritually. They don't want to hear about Jesus. There are several deaths every single year from people who just get drunk and pass out in the snow and freeze to death. And last year, while we were there, a young woman, about 22, died of alcohol poisoning. That's Nome, Alaska. It's a rough place. And a lot of the people that are trapped there, they can't get out of there. And I don't really enjoy just going to Nome, Alaska. And is it a risk? You know, I don't really see it as a risk, but yeah, some people do. And I go there because I want them to know about Jesus. Now, if I go to Alaska and something happens to me while I'm there, that's okay with me. Because I'll be gone. I'll leave this world doing one of the things I really enjoy doing the most, serving the Lord and honoring him and sharing his name with other folks. And so I'm okay with that. I'll be fine with that. Why? Because God knows what's best for me. Whatever God's purpose is for my life is what I really want, because I can't get a better thing for my life than God's purpose for my life. So I don't know how long my life will last. I don't know what will happen to me, but whatever God's purpose for me is what I want. That's what I want. Now, some people will look at that and say, that's a risk. But I'm saying what Romans 8:28 says, we know that God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. Now, listen, I want to challenge you today to live until you die. But you won't be able to do that if you don't understand this. Over in 2 Samuel chapter 10, and I'm not going to ask you to turn there, but there was a story over there about there was a king in another kingdom that died, and King David sent some envoys there to express his condolences. Well, when they were coming, the king's, all of his guys that were around him, his advisors and all, they said, hey, you know David didn't really come in to just give you his condolences. He's coming to spy out the land because he wants to invade the land. So when he sent his men there in good faith, they took his men, they cut off half their beards, they cut their clothes off from the waist down, and they sent them out. That was humiliating to these guys. So David had some men meet them halfway and said, look, you guys stay here till your beard grows back. He took them the clothes they needed, and now he's upset. Now he's angry. So he gets Joab, the commander of his army, and he says, Joab, I want you to go and take care of that. You take care of these people who have disrespected our men and treated them so harshly like that when there was no reason for them to do that. And so Joab goes. Now, they found out that this was going to happen, this nation, and they hired another nation to come help them. So there's two nations now against Israel. Joab gets his army and finds out that he's in the middle between these two nations, and they're about to have a battle. So he gets his brother, Abishai, and he says, we're going to split the army up. I want you to take this group. I'm going to take this group. And here's what he says to Abishai. Listen to this. He goes, if the Arameans are too strong for me, then you shall help me. But if the sons of Ammon are too strong for you, then I will come to help you. Now here's what he says to him, the last words. Be strong and let us show ourselves courageous for the sake of our people and for the cities of our God. Now listen to this. This is the key. And may the Lord do what is good in his sight. You see, Joab and Abishai that day, they didn't go into that battle knowing that they were going to win. They didn't go into that battle knowing they were going to have a victory. They did, by the way, destroyed both of those armies. They fled and ran from them from fear, and they had a great victory. But they didn't know that day. Here's what they said. We trust God's purpose in our lives. Even if he doesn't give us victory today, we still trust God's purpose in our lives. Now that is people who are risk takers. Risk takers. Because they say, whatever happens, we know that God's a good God. Every good gift comes from above, from the Father of lights, from whom there is no variation of turning. So here's the thing. These two guys, they said, yeah, we're going to trust, whatever the Lord wants to do, let him do it. We're going to do what we know we should do. We're going to take the risk. We're going to battle. We don't know if we're going to win the battle or not, but it doesn't really matter to us whether or not we win the battle or not. We're going to show ourselves strong for our cities. We're going to take up for God's people. We're going to do that. And if in the course of that God wants us to die, then that's okay. That's his purpose, and his purpose is always best. That's what they're saying. Girls, think about a young lady named Esther. Here's Esther. The king, he gets mad at his queen Vashti, and he banishes her. And so they have a little beauty contest in the land, and Esther wins the beauty contest. And so she becomes the queen. But they had a rule in this land, okay? Ahasuerus was the king's name, and so the rule was that you couldn't come into the king's presence unless he asked for you. And if you came without him summoning you, and he didn't hold out his golden scepter to you, then you were immediately killed on the spot. You were dead. So nobody was going to go see the king unless he asked them to come, because they weren't going to take a chance on their life. It would be their life. So Mordecai, the cousin of Esther, he kind of raises her. She's an orphan girl. Now she's the queen, and she's in the palace. And Mordecai gets wind that there's a guy named Haman. He wants to kill all the Jews in the land, and he's plotting against them. And so he goes to Esther and says, "You need to tell the king." And Esther's like, "I can't go to the king. He hasn't asked for me to come. And if I go to him and he doesn't hold out his scepter, then I'm dead." And Mordecai made that statement. He said, "Who knows but that you were put here for such a time as this?" You remember, you've heard that statement before. So here's what she does. Listen to this. Talking about a courageous young lady. She says, Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, "Go assemble all the Jews who are found in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maidens will also fast in the same way, and thus I will go into the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish." Do you get that? Esther doesn't really know what's going to happen. But here's what she does know. God's in control of it. So whatever it is that happens is going to be okay. She goes, "And if I perish, if I'm going to die, then I'm just going to die." That's the way it is. She wasn't afraid of that. Why? Because she'd taken care of everything. It was right between her and God. She was going to do what God told her to do. She was going to be obedient. That's a risk taker. I think about 3 Hebrew teenage boys had been taken captive and taken to a pagan country. And here they find themselves. You've heard of them, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You remember them? And the king builds a big old 90-foot tall thing, idol. And he says, whenever the trumpet sounds, everybody bows down to this idol. Well, they're all bowing down. And guess what? They look around. There's 3 teenage boys standing up. And so they look at them and they give them another chance. And they're still standing up. And the king brings them in. He says, "Hey, guys, you got to bow down or I'm going to have to throw you in the fiery furnace." And so those 3 guys, look what they say to him. In Daniel 3, they answered the king. And here's what they said. "O King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to give you an answer concerning this matter. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But," now here's the risky part, "but even if he does not, let it be known to you, O king, that we're not going to serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up." Do you hear what they said? They didn't know for sure what was going to happen. They didn't know when they got thrown in that fiery furnace if they were just going to burn up like that, or if they were going to walk out of that fiery furnace and not even smell like smoke, which is exactly what did happen. But they didn't know that. They said, "Our God is able to deliver us, but even if he doesn't, we trust his purpose in our lives. So if by our death we can honor him better than our life, then so be it." You see, risk takers, that's what they live in. That's the world they live in. They live in the world that says, "I'm not afraid to die because I know that my life is in God's hands. He only wants the best. His purpose for me is best. So whenever his purpose for me to die is complete, then I'm ready to go." Whatever it is that I might be doing at the time. Risk taking. That's what it's really all about, guys. And I want to challenge you this week as you think about this, that you might think about taking a risk for Jesus. Christian risk takers. That's what we need. That's what God's looking for. He's looking for people that are willing to take a risk for him, to step out there. Why? Because it's not foolish to take a risk for God, because God is a good God, and whatever his purpose and plan for you are, it's going to be the right thing for you and for everybody else, whatever that is. In my life, God has always given me some great victories. But there may be a day out there when I don't get those victories. There may be a day out there when I go on a mission trip I don't come back from. And if that happens, then I will be okay with that. Why? Because I know God's purpose for me, whatever it is right for me. And I'm okay with that. I've made my peace with that. I think it's great. I'll be ready to go because I'm not afraid of death. It's just a graduation into something far, far better than what I'm living in right now, this world and this old body that I live in. And the same thing goes for you. There is one risk that is not acceptable. I think it's if you want to talk about risk, I think this is the greatest risk of all. It's the greatest risk of all. And that is the risk of not accepting Jesus as your Savior, of being religious and playing that church game, but not really giving God all of you. That's very risky. As a matter of fact, you know what Jesus said about it in Matthew 16? He says, "For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul?" Risk. My mother's been dead about 10 years. And it was probably my mother who really taught me a little bit about risk taking. My mother didn't take risks like climbing mountains like I like to do or jumping out of airplanes or things like that. She took risks on people. When I was growing up, there was always somebody in our house that had trouble and got kicked out of their house or something like that. And so we didn't have but a little old tiny house. I'm talking probably 900 square feet. 3-bedroom, 1-bath house. I had 2 brothers. We all were in one of those little tiny rooms. I'm telling you, a room not even that size of one of these Sunday school rooms. My sister had a room. My parents had a room. There was 1 bathroom and a little tiny kitchen and a little living room. It was just a small house. It was a great place to grow up in, but it was just a small house because we didn't have a lot of money. But my mom always had people there. There'd be guys that to this day, matter of fact, when we buried my mom, there were guys that drove from all over Texas because they called her mom, because she would kind of take them in and help them. And she taught me some things. And I'll never forget when I was a junior in high school, we started a new high school. And so I was a junior and I was playing on the football team. And our first year, we won our district. This is the first year we had a football team. First year we were even a school. We won the district. And so we go to Austin, Texas to play in the playoffs. And we play in the University of Texas Stadium, our first playoff game against Austin Reagan. And we got beat. But I'll remember my mom, there was a young girl there that had come to live with her uncle. And she had tried to commit suicide once, and she had gotten into drugs. It was a pretty bad deal. And of course, my mom, that was what really excited her. She took a risk on people. So she invited this girl to come with us. And I had a couple of my buddies. They came with us. And so we went and we played the game. We lost our game that day. And the basketball team was also playing a tournament in Austin that weekend. And they were all there too. And I had a buddy. And I'm thinking, well, my mom's taking a risk on this girl. I'm going to take a risk on my buddy. His name was Glenn. And so my mom rented 2 hotel rooms, one for her and this young girl, and one for me and a couple of my buddies. One of my buddies was named Glenn. So I'll never forget that night we come back, and it's already after dark, and I walk in my room. I went over to my mom's room, check on her, everything was okay. I walk in my room, and there's 2 girls sitting on the bed in my room. And I said, hey, this probably is not going to work, girls, you know? And they were 2 prostitutes who had come from San Antonio because they knew this girl. She had called them, and they had come. And so I said, hey, girls, this isn't going to work. You're going to have to leave this room. And so they pulled a knife on me. One of them pulls out a knife, and she gets real ugly and mean and starts cussing and all this. Finally, the other girl says, hey, we can't afford to get arrested. We got weed on us. We need to go, and da-da-da-da. And finally, and all this time this has happened, my friend Glenn comes in. And he's so drunk he can barely stand up. And he falls down in the bathtub in the bathroom, and he's doing, call the law, call the law. You know, he's just screaming. It's like something you would see on a teenage movie. But this really happened to me when I was a junior in high school. So, you know, now I'm already involved in my church. God's already changed my life. So I'm kind of like, I don't even know how to handle this, you know. I mean, I'm not really sure what to do with all this. I got my friend in the bathroom drunk going, call the law, and I got 2 prostitutes in my room, and one of them's pulled a knife on me, all right? And they're not going to leave. So finally, after everything else in the confrontation, they leave the room. Glenn finally passes out, and we get him to bed. Now, you know, I kept on working with Glenn, and it wasn't probably but about 6 months later that Glenn gave his heart to Jesus. Can I tell you, Glenn went to the Air Force Academy. He was a great student. He became a pilot. As a matter of fact, You know that secret helicopter that the Navy SEALs flew in when they flew to Osama bin Laden's compound? He flew those helicopters before anybody knew we had those helicopters. He was a test pilot that flew those things. Those radar that you can't see them at night. And because we had that thing that had happened when Jimmy Carter was president, and we tried to rescue our hostages, and there was a big fiasco in the desert. He just looked at me and said, "Hey, that's never going to happen again. They will never hear us coming." And he flew those helicopters. He knew. And when he left that, he went back to the Air Force Academy and taught as a professor there. And then he ended up going to Guam. You know what Glenn does today? For the last 25 years, Glenn has been the pastor of a church in Guam. There he went back. And he still serves there today in the church that he founded and started. And I learned a lesson out of that. Did I take a risk? Yeah, you bet I did, because here I am, the church kid now. I'm in the good Christian church kid with 2 prostitutes in my room and a drunk kid, in the bathtub. So, I was taking a risk, really, absolutely. But did God bless that risk? Yeah, he did. Because I saw my mom always pouring into other people. And I said, it's risky to pour into other people. Sometimes you find yourself in places you don't really want to be, and it's kind of messy because people's lives are messy. But I began to realize, hey, that's where it's really at. Now, I can stand up and talk to 600 or 700 people on Sunday morning, but you know where the real ministry happens in people's lives? It's you, and it's people like you who are with them every day out there on the streets. And you're a witness to them, and you've cared enough about them to get involved in their life, even though their life is kind of messy and it's not pristine and it's not convenient. And sometimes you find yourself in really tough situations that make you feel uncomfortable. And you say, so if I serve the Lord, is he going to put me in uncomfortable situations? And I'm saying absolutely he is going to. That's a promise. He's going to. So guys, when you're sitting here this week talking about taking a risk, I want you to get it. Here's what God's looking for. He's looking for some real men and real women who are willing to say, hey, it's not even about me. It's not about me. It's about God's plan for me. It's about God's purpose for me. It's about God's love for me. It's about God's grace that he's offered me. That's what it's really about. And I know that no matter what comes my way, it had to get through him first. And so I'm willing to take the risk when God puts it before me, because I know that he already knows the outcome. I know that God has given me an opportunity. There might be a Glenn in your life. There could be a Betty in your life. There could be somebody that really needs somebody in your life. They need Jesus. And they're not going to come to this church, and they're not going to listen to me preach. But they know you. And if they know you care about them, you can begin to tell them about a God who cares about them as well and loves them. Taking a risk. I'm challenging you this weekend. I'm challenging you this weekend. I'm going to challenge you to take a risk for Jesus. I'm going to challenge you to say, you know what? I'm tired of being safe. I'm tired of sitting in a pew and letting everybody else around me do it, and I'm just kind of back there. I'm willing to step out. Look, guys, what does it say about our faith in God if we're ashamed of Jesus? If we aren't willing to step out and say, hey, we belong to him. We're not afraid of that, even though we live in a world that doesn't want to hear it and might even persecute you a little bit. They might make fun of you a little bit. But what they're not doing is threatening your life right now in America. But they are in some places in the world. When I was in Egypt, and the churches are behind bars and gates in Egypt, the Baptist churches. And I'll never forget, one Sunday morning I preached at a Baptist church in Alexandria, Egypt. I rode a train down there from Cairo, and I thought, gosh, I wonder, because this church is right in the middle of this huge city, millions of people, several millions of people everywhere. And I thought, when we get in there to sing, do they sing? Or do they just kind of not want anybody to know they're really worshiping, because it just attracts attention, and crazy people come and try to blow them up, which happens in Egypt sometimes. And so we get in there, and those people, there's about 400 of them, they start singing, and I'm telling you, they sing to the top of their lungs. You could have heard them 5-6 blocks away. They didn't care. They didn't care who heard them singing about Jesus. They sang about Jesus. They worshiped him. Can I just tell you that I really felt small in front of those people because I knew that what they risk every day. There was a young woman there, 23, who was a translator for me. She was a kindergarten teacher, and she had not worked in 4 years because she was a Christian, and they wouldn't let her. She understood what it means to take a risk for Jesus. Hey, guys, you've not been asked to shed your blood for him, but you should be willing to. And if God says to you, hey, all I'm asking you to do is risk going to your school and your home and your neighborhood and these streets out here and just let people know I really care about them. That's what God's asking you to risk. Really, after what Jesus has done for us, how could we look at him and say, I'm not willing to do that? That's what I'm hoping you'll catch this weekend, is that, hey, I can take a risk, and I'm not afraid of it. Why? Because God already knows the outcome, and I'm trusting his plan for me. So it's really not that risky. It's really not that risky to just trust his plan for me. I want you to bow your heads with me for just a minute. In a minute, I'm going to ask Chad and some of our counselors to come up here, and they're going to be up here at the front. You may need to pray with somebody. You may need to talk to somebody. There may be somebody here tonight who has never really given their heart to Jesus. And you need to do that. You need to take care of that. That's the greatest risk of all. If you die without knowing Jesus, you have no more opportunities. That's it. Your eternity is over with. You will spend an eternity in a place called hell. I believe there's a real hell. And I don't say that to